putting to move to the market because it's also an important one. And we see we're coming in her red, but thankfully that's not the color of the market. The market is really green.
It's green.
And it's a follow-up from what we closed with on Friday.
It's a follow-up, but the week ended in the red.
Yeah, because we had four negative trading days.
It was a miracle we had that bull come up, showed his face on Friday.
Yeah.
Just, saved face for some of us.
Like, okay, I think it was just investors checking to see, prices have really
gone low. Let's take advantage of the dip.
Advantage of this and hop into one or two stocks.
Yes, and we did see that market still close negative, but thankfully we're seeing a rebound at intraday. Hopefully that is sustained.
Yeah, well, I will be happy until we get back to 100,000.
Oh well, let's keep our fingers crossed. Hold your breath. So let's begin as always with major equities in Africa. We see sentiments at intraday were mostly negative. Nigeria's NGX was the lone gainer there. It was up by 0.17%, but at midday it was 0.13%. Still strong. Well, slightly strong, moderately strong at intraday, but this was lifted by gains in the banking stocks. Now, looking at South Africa, we see it at intraday down 0.3%. Elsewhere, Egypt's EGX30 was also down at intraday, 0.43%. But let's look at Kenya's close for Friday. It was in the green, 0.32%. But let's get a deeper dive now into intraday activities at the NGX. Onose Asoti Enaolo, investment analyst, Main Street Capital, joins us. Good afternoon, Onose. Before we dive into intraday markets and see what activities are driving stocks and stocks that we need to look at, let's look at stocks that moved the market last week, especially stocks that gained, stocks to watch. We look at the screen now, we see stocks like livestock. The top three gainers for last week. We saw livestock taking the lead there, up 27.03%. It opened the week last week, 1 naira 85 kobo and closed at 2 naira 35 kobo. That's a very big leap for that stock. And, we all know why that, livestock ministry is working there possibly. And now, Associated Bus Company, it's opened at 64 kobo and closed at 77 kobo. And then we have that 20.31% uptick for that. And Ether, oil and gas, opened at 15 naira, 20 kobo to close at 18 naira. And we see that 18.42% uptick for that stock. Let's look at it. We just don't have gainers. We have those that we are the bottom, the bottom three. So we have that. So top losers, we have Africa Prudential opening at 9 naira and closing at 7 naira 40 kobo, having that massive drop there. And Thomas Wyatt opened at 2 naira 40 kobo, closed at 2 naira 16 kobo. And we have PZ Cousins opening at 22 naira, closing at 19 naira 80 kobo. Onose, what do you have to say about these stocks? Why do we see livestock for two consecutive sessions now, two consecutive weeks, leading the trend in that massive uptick?
Hi, Will. Thanks for having me. So for livestock specifically, with the news of the president wanting to create a new Ministry of Livestock. Now that news has been received with a little bit of there's been some controversy about around the news. Some people say the ministry, we already have an agricultural ministry. Why do we need a new ministry of livestock? But whether or not it's controversial, it shows one important thing, that the government at this point in time is really looking into agriculture and food security. And if they are looking into these things and they are willing to start making efforts, to secure food and to even boost food production, then it means companies that are really keyed into that provide some sort of infrastructure, are going to really stand to benefit the most from that. And then we see, livestock feed. The company, they have, at least they claim to have a global distribution network for livestock feed. So if we have a situation where, the agricultural sector in the entire country is being lifted up, the government is making, really conscious efforts to lift, that sector up, then it stands to reason that, the company is going to gain significantly. And then, investors know this, investors anticipate this. And, you look at the stocks price and even the technicals, you see a lot of really, really huge green candles. So if this is whether or not the Ministry of Agriculture thing really flies. The point is that we know that the government really wants to get into agriculture right now. So companies like Livestock Feed, they tend to gain.
Okay, so
but the other.
Now, looking at the livestock feed, looking at intraday numbers, want to know how they're doing at intraday. Livestock was down at intraday. Profit taking?
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing goes up forever, so when you have really strong bullish moves like that, especially that are triggered by news events, you will expect that people who have, profited from that will, cash in their chips and take profit. So it's normal to see livestock trading lower, today.
Okay, so moving on, the CBN governor, we just want to check in on the recapitalization drive. The CBN governor, Mr. Yemi Cardoso, did say that excluding retained earnings leveled the playing field for the banking sector. Now, the playing field is leveled. How are the stocks faring?
Banking stocks are actually doing pretty okay. Now, it depends from bank to bank. Banks that have announced, their recapitalization efforts, are doing, a little bit better than banks that haven't. Like if you see Fidelity's price, now we're not seeing really strong green candles, but we are seeing a gradual move upward. I believe it should be trading around higher than 11 naira today. GCCO, this morning they released their announcements, 9 billion shares, at 44 naira 50 kobo each, and so we see GCCO trading favorably, today, and even Access Bank, releasing their announcement. So we see that generally, despite even the fear of dilution, we see that investors are positive, reacting positively to the bank's recapitalization efforts. I do not believe that most of the major banks that we see, tier one banks and, really strong banks with really strong potential like Fidelity, I do not see, a problem with them raising funds. We've had investors come to us to ask us, what we think about, Fidelity Bank. So we see a positive, it's really a positive event, positive things going on, and we see that reflected in the prices. So for banks that have started, we see an increase in their prices. Now we're not saying that this increase in price it could purely be event driven like we see with livestock, but we know that in the short term, yes, we expect some dilution. Like for example, GTCO, that's like a 23% dilution, compared to existing shares.
Okay.
But in the long run, we expect that this is a really positive event for even price and
Definitely would always keep track and see how this develops, especially for banking stocks. Thank you so much, Onose Asotie, Naolo, investment analyst, Main Street Capital, for joining us on Business Incorporated.
Thanks for having me.
So now let's look at other stocks. We're looking at the Gulf region, the Middle East, which were mixed at intraday. Abu Dhabi's index was down 0.24%, was mixed sentiments there. Dubai was up 0.04% at intraday. Still within the region, Saudi was up 0.34%. And this was as investors turned to focus on the U.S. Federal Reserve's interest rate cuts. Now, Qatar was also up 0.424%. Now, Qatar news there, we see that the index, that's the exchange, recorded the best monthly returns in the Gulf in the month of June. The index soared in almost all sessions last month, posting its highest monthly gain this year, supported by robust domestic buying. Rebound in natural gas prices also strengthened the sentiments in the markets. Now, the benchmark index came close to breaching 10,000 points, but trended slightly downward by the end of the month to close with a gain of 7% at 9,900 points. Now let's look at the U.S., where stock futures are higher in overnight trading. We see the Dow Jones up 0.55%. S&P 500 futures is also up 0.42%. NASDAQ futures up 0.49%. And this is also driven by earnings reports coming in there. We see reports coming from Goldman Sachs with revenue today coming in at $12.73 billion. Earnings per share, $8.62. That's a big one. We're also expecting earnings reports from Netflix, and we're also expecting from other big financial companies in the country. Let's look at Asia now, what the market is doing there. Very quickly, we see that Asian markets, we see the Nikkei is closed for a holiday, was closed at 41,190 points. The Kospi in South Korea is up 1.14%, and the Hang Seng index in China is down massively 1.52%. And investors are looking to the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life, and that is shaking a bit of sentiments there. We're seeing some of that, and also, China's GDP numbers coming in lower than expected, but that didn't stop the numbers. Let's look at Shanghai index. We see it up 0.09%, closed at 2,974 points. S&P ASX 200 was also up 0.73%, and that's in Australia. So markets are not doing badly, especially with the news of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life, and that really, like, investors are watching to see what's going to happen next. How, investors are like,
did you see the sharp movement on Bitcoin after that news?
It was just like, why is the market trending up after that news?
Because Trump is a crypto lover, I guess.
Okay.
All right, Will, thank you so much for that.